Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Matt Subert, and I'm the Sales and Marketing Director for the Lewis Group. The fact that I'm here again after last year's presentation either indicates that I was a brilliant and charismatic speaker last year, that there was nobody else available, or that the exceptionally large cheque that I sent off to Gary Lucas has swung the bill. I'll let you decide over the course of the next 2.5 hours. No, my presentation is only 15 minutes. It just feels like 2.5 hours. On a general housekeeping note, can I please confirm that all mobile phones are actually switched off? This is hugely discourteous to those people who are genuinely trying to sleep. So what's changed over the last 12 months? Well, I have a bright green banner behind me and not a bright orange one. And for the last 12 months, I've tried to convince most of you that the advertising campaign that we set off with Debt Differently We Do is actually innovative, creative, and award-winning and clever, and that Yoda from Star Wars hasn't actually been hired by the Lewis Group marketing team. He, of course, now works for Vodafone. His commute was going to be a bugger all the way over to Cleckheaton, particularly the contraflow around the Dagobah system. But seriously, we know that in the next 18 months that we're going to see a transfer of powers from the Office of Fair Trading to the Financial Conduct Authority, which almost certainly means even more regulation and governance. And it's likely there'll be even more emphasis on compliance. But I personally feel we're also starting to see evidence of a reality check. And our clients are under greater pressure to deliver better financial performance in an even tougher marketplace. And they expect us to optimize performance at all times. So how do you balance these seemingly conflicting objectives? High standards of compliance and treating customers fairly with the lead to collect more money. Well, we think there's a way of doing both. They say there's nothing really new left to be discovered. So if you expected a list of new magic bullet collection methods or services, then you'd be very disappointed. You may well be very disappointed anyway. I can occasionally have that effect on people. I should also make a distinction here that I'm not talking about technology, but methodology. We believe that the secret of good collections is not about just new techniques, but rather new thinking in how those techniques are actually deployed. And it starts, of course, with the intelligent analysis of data and its proper segmentation, but with a twist. So the basics. I think that segmentation and scoring are now commonplace in DCAs and clients, and in the main, the one size is not being applied to fit all. By and large, clients and their DCAs do a good job identifying fast-tracking cases, identifying problem customers, and of course, customers with problems. Many hours have been devoted to getting the best out of our letter telephony operations, and I'm sure that many more will be devoted in continuing to tinker around the edges in order to make minor improvements. More recently, we've all been thinking and looking at the best use of e-collections, and I think that we have a common view in terms of the importance of creating specialist teams to deal with those customers in financial difficulties. So to be clear, I'm not going to concentrate today on segmentation and scoring, letter telephony, call centres, or financial difficulty units. If you're not already mostly there with these things already, then you're probably, with respect, in the wrong room. What I am going to talk about has the potential to significantly add incremental recovery streams from tools that you may well have neglected. Confrontational slide. I think the next 5 minutes are going to split the room. Not everybody's going to agree with me. But I'm going to request that you look at two very underutilised collections mediums with a fresh set of eyes. Now, thank God that Jonathan Coburn for Ann Summers wasn't actually doing this presentation here. Who knows what this slide would have looked like then. Hands up, and it's a bit of audience participation here. Hands up, who used doorstep collections as part of their collections routine? A reasonable number? Okay, good. I spoke with a client last month who told me that doorstep collections had no place in the modern world, and if they worked at all, that they only worked with small balances. I used to work for a major DCA who was convinced that doorstep added very little and that usage would probably cause complaints. Other clients question if doorstep may not in some way be against the basic principles of TCF. So let's look at the facts and address some of the prejudices and misconceptions that are no doubt out there. The Lewis Group alone collects well in excess of £8 million per annum from tens of thousands of customers with very few complaints. Literally, only a handful. The fact is that some people assume that all doorstep collectors are my size and appearance, and that I am in fact some kind of poster boy for the collections industry. It's not so. Nearly half of our collections people on the doorstep are women, and being my height and build would probably be a distinct disadvantage. It would also be a disadvantage to a workforce where the last thing that they want to do is to intimidate or scare your customers. They are, in fact, very professional, businesslike and empathetic, living in the same community as their customers. In fact, in many cases, the arrival of a collector at the doorstep is the first engagement that the customer may have had with anyone, and some anecdotal evidence suggests that not only do customers not mind someone calling, but they can sometimes often perceive this as being of real benefit to them. Payment terms are often perceived to be more reasonable, and they're given the provision of regular collections by agencies at a time and frequency to suit themselves. You've only got to look at the effect that was had on the industrial branch insurance business with companies like the Prudential and Refuge Insurance. When they withdrew all the doorstep collectors, they literally lost their business. Our collectors are welcomed and often form really excellent relationships with their customers who may have struggled in the past with budgeting and or who may have limited banking facilities or who may simply have been burying their heads in the sand. Yes, it is true that doorstep collections can be a little more expensive and therefore should mostly be used when other less expensive collection methods have been tried and failed, but often not as late as clients use it now. Why? Well, because it delivers incremental recoveries targeting those who may be ignoring other contact strategies. After all, collections is all about engaging in a dialogue with your customers. What else are you going to do if the customer is ignoring your letters, isn't on the phone or answering, and is ignoring all other contact attempts? Also, what about reconnect visits, where a doorstep collector simply asks the customer to speak with the client either on their phone or to call the client's call centre? At the Lewis Group, we're also uniquely using our doorstep agents to call upon our customers post-litigation but pre-enforcement, and we consistently collect an average payment of £167 as a gateway payment from those with the capacity and desire to cease the litigation process, and we do it in over 25% of the cases visited. As a DCA, what are you going to do differently that has not already been done by your clients? Clearly, you're going to be using phone and letters, SMS, maybe email and IVM, but why ignore the human touch? And as a client, are your DCAs fully equipped to offer you a bespoke service that can bring other different contact mediums to the table? Doorstep has a valuable place in today's collection world, but doorstep should mean doorstep, not simply recycling letter telephony at a much higher commission rate. And it should not simply be an attempt to resolve a problem where the customer has ignored all attempts to resolve their issue in the past in a single call without the option of regular ongoing collections. Right. If you think the doorstep divides the room, then litigation is positively going to have people fighting in the aisles. Perhaps not. But buckle up, this is about to get bumpy. In the distant past, I used to work for a major DCA who, in the 5 years I was on their board, told me point blank that they had proven beyond any mathematical doubt that litigation was not cost-effective and simply didn't work. My next 5 years with another major DCA saw me being tasked to bring on litigation work over letter telephony only and positively discouraged from bringing in ordinary prime without the litigation option, as the strategy was so successful and profitable. I've also lost count of the number of clients who've told me that they've trialled litigation in the past and it lost them a fortune. Often they say they picked a number of customers and sued them and then they didn't pay. Or they sued them and then they didn't pay and then they applied for an enforcement and they still didn't pay. Often it transpires that they'd instructed an intermediary that was rewarded when litigation was commenced, win, lose or draw, but got little or nothing when action was stopped. or it transpires that accounts were picked by balance, the higher the better. Or the trial was based on one whole month's work, or that they were based upon data segmentation, but data from the original source application. So again, let's look at the facts. Let's start with when litigation should not be used. If a customer is lacking in ability and capacity, litigation is totally inappropriate. It is not only likely to be a costly waste, but it may also further damage the relationship and is completely against TCF principles. And it may well bring significant distress to a customer in genuine hardship. But where litigation is highly effective is when they are appropriately targeted towards the individuals whose central problem is one of intent. And on this basis, I would suggest that it is entirely within the principles of TCF. At the Lewis Group, we have for many years been the largest litigator in the UK, in the past issuing well in excess of 100,000 claims every year. And we're still one of the largest users of the Civil Court Book Issue Centre, litigating on behalf of banks, lenders and central government, in very significant volumes, currently this year over 50,000 claims. In short, we believe we know a thing or two about litigation. So what about some facts and figures to show if the numbers really stack up? Or is this just sending good money after bad? Crucially, also, is this going to be incremental recoveries, but only at the expense of opening Pandora's box for complaints and counterclaims? One of our largest banking clients has for many years turned conventional wisdom on its head, and I think you'll be amazed by their model. This client works their cases in a conventional way, through segmented work streams, looking at previous history and up-to-date data to help them fast-track certain cases to external placement. At this point, they utilise a panel of DCAs for prime collection using letter and telephony only. They send cases where they feel that litigation would not be appropriate to be used, and their agents only use letter telephony in their collections. The remainder they send to us and one other agency for a 30-day pre-letter telephony routine. If at the end of this routine we've not reached a satisfactory arrangement, and provided that we've not identified that the customer is in financial hardship or that it is not appropriate for some other reason, we commence litigation. Okay, now some of you may say that that's not that unusual, and you may even do something similar yourself. But what would you say if I'd said that they put well over half their cases down the route that leads to litigation? And what would you say if I said that their recoveries were consistently well over 40%, as opposed to about a third of that came through normal collections without litigation? And what would you also say if I said that we collected from over 25% of our cases after judgment but before enforcement through our doorstep agents, something that we believe is totally unique today in the industry? And lastly, what would you say if I said we did all this with a microscopic level of complaints? Would that make you think again? It's also interesting to say that there are plenty of examples like this, and many of you will be aware of the use by catalogue clients of litigation in the past with a profile of customers, let's face it, many of us would deem unsuitable for litigation, but where recoveries were often well over 50 or 60%. One of the common themes of these last two examples is that they're both relatively low balances, which ironically, again, is often seen as a reason not to litigate, even when the facts say that this may be a significant factor supporting successful action. What is a low balance? Well, some of our clients seem to define low balance as balances under £2,000, but we have great results with balances much lower than that, and there is no commercial reason not to sue for a few £100s. The success of litigation is the appropriate selection of cases, along with a continued dialogue to explain next steps, and lastly, an understanding from the outset of the type of enforcement action that is planned, as well as a flexibility to negotiate, withdraw, or change strategy. If you always do what you've always done, nothing will change. Know your customers and try and find as many ways to engage with them as possible, including litigation if their problem is lack of intent. It has not been simply about cash collections for a very long time now, but organisations, as demonstrated by another of our banking clients, have extended their journey of excellence from internal interaction with customers in financial difficulties into their external relationships with DCAs. Today, it's all about intelligent application of a toolkit of solutions, old and new, in a fully compliant manner. If you've enjoyed this presentation today, then I have been Matt Subert. If you've not, then I've been John Ricketts. Thank you very much.